The First Australian Biker War is one of the longest biker wars in history, involving the Bandidos, Comanchero, Hells Angels, and several other Australian biker clubs. It all began with a rift within the Comanchero Motorcycle Club, a fracture so deep that it birthed Australia's first Bandidos chapter. This betrayal ignited a chain of events, culminating in the infamous Milperra Massacre, one of the deadliest moments in biker history, leaving 7 people dead in just 10 minutes. Full-blown street battles erupted, leaving innocent bystanders caught in the crossfire, killed or gravely injured as collateral damage. This is biker history with Magnus. But before we begin, remember to hit that subscribe button and put on all notifications so you don't miss my next biker video. William Jock Ross, the former leader of the Comanchero Motorcycle Club, was one of Australia's most notorious and feared bikers. Throughout his violent career, he has survived multiple stabbings and shootings and has been convicted of manslaughter. The Comanchero began modestly with only 6 members, but rapidly grew into a powerful and feared biker club. Ross ran the club with military precision, structuring it like a paramilitary force. Members underwent firearms training, learning how to shoot and fight with deadly efficiency. Always armed to the teeth, Ross led Comanchero under the self-proclaimed title of Supreme Commander. If that title rings a bell, it's because another feared leader also uses that title. He aggressively expanded the club's influence, taking over rival operations and establishing the club as the dominant outlaw motorcycle club in Australia. However, as the club grew in numbers, internal divisions began to form. A younger generation of members resented Jock's authoritarian and uncompromising leadership style. By 1983, just a year before the infamous Milperra Massacre, these tensions came to a breaking point. In an effort to maintain control, Ross approved relocating the clubhouse, a decision that would mark the beginning of his downfall. The younger members embraced a different culture, indulging in wild parties, wet t-shirt contests, and extravagant lifestyles that the older members found distasteful. Jock had lost his grip on the club. Seeing no other option, he announced a split. The younger members would form a new chapter, while the veteran members would return to their original clubhouse. Leadership of the breakaway faction fell to Anthony "Snotty" Spencer, whom Jock had once regarded as a little brother. Their bond had been close, until Spencer secretly traveled to the United States and brokered a deal to turn his chapter into Australia's first branch of the Bandidos. When Spencer returned, he brought all 30 of his men with him, fully aligned with the Bandidos. To Jock, this was the ultimate betrayal. Snotty had gone from being like a son to becoming a traitor. That betrayal would soon escalate into one of the most infamous outbreaks of biker violence the world had ever seen, the Milperra Massacre. Over the next year, tensions between the former comrades erupted into violent clashes. Jock himself was nearly run down by a car while riding his motorcycle, but managed to escape. In retaliation, he and his loyalists bombed a small shed next to Bandido's clubhouse, sending a clear message: stay back or face the consequences. The stage had been set for war. On August 10th, 1984, there was a phone call between Jock Ross and Snotty Spencer where war was declared. Only the members' homes and workplaces were off limits. Anywhere else was fair game. 3 weeks later, members of the Bandidos turned up at Comanchero member Glenn Eves' house and told him that they would be at the Viking Tavern, where a motorcycle parts swap meet was being held, attracting hundreds of bikers and enthusiasts. Among the people there was 14-year-old Leanne Walters, an innocent spectator admiring the bikes. The challenge to confront their enemy was readily accepted by the Comancheros. At 1 p.m., a large convoy of Comanchero bikers roared onto the scene, their presence commanding attention. Many were armed and had walkie-talkies that crackled, a detail that caught the eye of Linda Mutton, who was attending the event with her biker boyfriend. Something felt off. The members were waiting in the parking lot of the Viking Tavern, heavily armed, but some members believed that the Bandidos were not showing up, so they headed inside the tavern. Approximately 20 minutes later, the Bandidos showed up, 34 of them in total, including Snotty and the Campbell brothers, also heavily armed. The two groups faced off, tension crackling in the air. Someone shouted, "Drop your weapons, let's fight like men." But before any fists could fly, a gunshot rang out, shattering the silence, and chaos erupted. Bullets tore through the crowd as people screamed and ran for cover. Parents desperately shielded their children, some even throwing them over fences to get them to safety. Linda, still inside her car, ducked as a bullet smashed through her windshield. Miraculously unharmed, she scrambled out, crawling under another vehicle, while snapping photos of the unfolding mayhem. Leanne Walters wasn't as lucky. A rifle round fired by a Bandidos struck her down, making her one of the 7 people killed that day, and the only one that wasn't a biker. In the thick of the battle, Jock, wielding a machete, allegedly shouted, "Come on, kill them all!" a claim he has vehemently denied to this day. Jock is struck by 2 bullets, one in the head and one in the chest. He collapses, gravely wounded, as chaos erupts around him. The police respond immediately, dispatching multiple patrol cars and a helicopter to the scene. The situation is total anarchy, with gunfire and brutal hand-to-hand combat between the rivaling clubs. In a critical moment, a police officer confronts Sunshine, a key figure within the Comancheros. After a tense and nerve-wracking standoff, the officer convinces Sunshine to lay down his weapon and follow him. Sunshine then takes the lead in persuading the others to do the same. After 10 minutes of indiscriminate violence, the bloodbath, which has escalated into an outright massacre, is finally over. As the dust settles, the aftermath is grim. 4 Comancheros and 2 Bandidos members lie dead, alongside a 14-year-old girl who was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. The exact number of wounded varies slightly across reports, but approximately 21 bikers were injured, many critically. This remains the worst single incident in biker history worldwide. Never before nor since have so many lives been lost in a single event. The police swiftly launch Operation Hard Walk, a large-scale investigation and arrest campaign. What follows is Australia's longest-running trial, an extensive legal battle that stretches over 13 months. When Linda takes the stand to testify, several bikers on trial glare at her, making menacing gestures, dragging their fingers across their throats in a silent but chilling threat. Despite this, she delivers her testimony and has to move several times the next 30 years because of death threats. In the end, 30 bikers are sentenced to prison. The Bandidos' president, Snotty, refuses to face the legal proceedings. He ended his own life in jail. The original charges of murder are eventually reduced to manslaughter. Jock is sentenced to 5 years and 3 months in prison. After serving his time, he retires from the biker world in 2003. After the Milperra Massacre, the war between the Bandidos and Comanchero never truly ended. But they weren't the only ones expanding their reach. Other clubs were rising, carving out their own territories and rivalries. The Rebels Motorcycle Club, one of Australia's largest and most notorious outlaw biker gangs, had been around since 1969. Founded in Brisbane, Queensland, it was among the first outlaw clubs to take root in the country. With power came violence. The Rebels built a fearsome reputation, clashing with the Hells Angels, Comancheros, and Bandidos in turf wars and blood feuds. Meanwhile, the Hells Angels had staked their claim in Australia by 1975, igniting their own deadly rivalries. Tensions with the Comancheros boiled over spectacularly in 2009, erupting into one of the most infamous biker brawls in Australian history, the Sydney Airport Brawl. Like the great Nordic biker war before it, violence was ignited by chance. When members of the Comanchero and Hells Angels happened to be on the same domestic flight from Melbourne to Sydney,
Several people asked to meet Comanchero boss Mick Howie as he arrived on a flight from Melbourne. Hells Angel President Derek Waynahu was also on the flight. AL said at the gate the Hells Angel boss shouldered his Comanchero rival. He describes how the violence escalated. Then I hit Derek on the left side of his face. Derek went down. After that, everyone was fighting.
In broad daylight, chaos exploded. Metal bollards, fists and bins became weapons as travelers watched in horror.
And stabbed the Comanchero boss in the arm. Later, AL saw the man who used the knife lying on the ground. The witness told the court he saw a member of the Comancheros he knew only as Tusa standing over the man on the floor. He watched as Tusa picked up what was described as a silver bin, raised it into the air and brought it down twice on the side of the man's head. After the second blow, he said, the man on the floor stopped moving.
Anthony Zervas, a 29-year-old Hells Angels associate and the brother of the Sydney chapter's president, Derek Waynahu. Zervas suffered massive head injuries after being struck repeatedly with a metal bin.
And then I saw one of the men lying on the ground and another man came up with the pole and just started smashing it into his head.
He didn't survive and died on the floor of the airport. Violence had once again spilled into the public eye, proving that Australia's outlaw biker wars were far from over. Mick Howie was convicted of the murder and was himself killed in the parking lot of the Rockdale Fitness First Gym in 2018 when he was shot in his car. The murder has never been solved. The next major public brawl erupted on September 27, 2013, in Broad Beach, a bustling beachside suburb of the Gold Coast. On that day, members of the Bandidos motorcycle club were on the hunt for a rival, a member of the Finks, another notorious outlaw motorcycle club formed in 1969, and one of the Bandidos' fiercest enemies.
The officers know something is up. Hordes of gang members are walking towards a family restaurant. It's alleged the dispute over a girl has several of them looking to settle an old score with a man from a rival motorcycle club.
Tensions simmered as police grew increasingly uneasy, watching dozens of Bandidos members march toward the Sofitel Hotel, a popular family-friendly dining area.
By now, police can sense trouble is about to start. Every available car and officer in the area is radioed in for backup, as officers on the ground try to intercept more bikies heading to the restaurant, hell-bent on lending their numbers to an already intimidating crowd.
The Bandidos were hostile. Their presence was intimidating, and the outnumbered officers struggled to maintain control.
Stand back, stand back. Stand back, bro.
It's clear from the footage the bikies have no fear or respect for the police. They even taunt and abuse officers, challenging them to a fight.
Police desperately worked to keep the bikers away from civilians, trying to prevent a public disaster. But suddenly, chaos erupted. A massive brawl exploded in the streets, sending tables flying and bystanders scrambling for cover. The violence was brutal and swift, leaving multiple people injured as the scene descended into widespread panic. By the time the dust settled, 18 bikers had been arrested.
It's these videos which prompted the Queensland government to act and introduce the toughest bikie legislation the country has ever seen.
The Broad Beach riot sent shockwaves through Australia, prompting law enforcement to launch an aggressive crackdown on outlaw motorcycle gangs. The infamous Broad Beach brawl marked a pivotal moment, amplifying public concern over outlaw motorcycle gangs and heightening the tension between these groups and law enforcement. That same year, the Mongols Motorcycle Club planted their flag in Australia, opening their first chapter down under. They made their presence known in Victoria, particularly Melbourne, when a splinter faction of members from the Comanchero Club defected to join the Mongols. Their entry into Australia sparked even more violence, including drive-by shootings, firebombings, and street brawls. In response to the escalating violence, the Australian government took a stand in 2016 with the Serious and Organised Crime Legislation Amendment Act. The law was designed to dismantle criminal organizations and curb future violence. It ramped up penalties for serious crimes like drug trafficking and extortion, while granting courts the power to impose harsh control orders on individuals, limiting their movements, associations, and activities. The law also severely restricted biker members from entering industries like security, tattoo parlors, and other lucrative sectors, cutting off vital revenue streams. Moreover, several states enacted anti-consorting laws that prohibited bikers from gathering in groups or using clubhouses as meeting spots, effectively making regular meetings illegal, even if the clubhouse was privately owned.
Police have launched another big blow to outlaw bikie gangs with more than 100 arrests nationwide in a coordinated week-long blitz. Half a dozen clubs were targeted, including the Hells Angels, Comancheros and Bandidos.
From the suburbs of Perth to Tasmanian bushland, South Australia, Queensland, New South Wales and Victoria in between.
With the sole aim of causing maximum disruption to the outlaw motorcycle gang network.
Though these new laws and police actions have seriously limited the bikers, it hasn't stopped the violence completely. One of the most shocking and high-profile assassinations in Australia's outlaw biker history unfolded on the night of December 12, 2020. Nick Martin, the former president of the Rebels, was gunned down in a cold-blooded sniper attack at Perth Motorplex in Western Australia. Martin was at a drag racing event, seated among the crowd with his wife and young family. From 300 meters away, a hired assassin, a highly trained ex-Special Forces soldier, took aim with a high-powered rifle. The single lethal shot tore through Martin's body and struck a young bystander, an 8-year-old boy, throwing the packed venue into chaos. Despite his mortal wound, Martin staggered to his feet and managed to cry out that he had been shot before collapsing. His wife and children watched in horror as he took his final breath. He died there right in front of them. The assassin was paid $150,000 for the hit, but was soon caught. To escape a life sentence, he turned on his employer, offering damning testimony in exchange for a 20-year prison term. According to the Australian Crime Commission, there are 35 outlaw motorcycle gangs in Australia, with a total of about 3,500 patched bikers. These gangs include internationally recognized groups like the Bandidos, Hells Angels, and the Gypsy Jokers, alongside homegrown clubs such as the Comanchero, Finks, and Rebels. These 6 clubs are known as the Big Six of Australia's biker world. What sets Australia apart from other parts of the world is that its outlaw motorcycle scene largely resisted the consolidation that happened elsewhere. In the US, the biker world is dominated by 4 major gangs: Hells Angels, Outlaws, Bandidos, and Pagans. Many European and Canadian gangs are merely local branches of American clubs. But as Canadian journalists William Marsden and Julian Scheer pointed out, unlike in Europe or North America, neither the Hells Angels nor the Bandidos succeeded in entirely vanquishing the fiercely independent Australian biker gangs. And as for Australia, the legacy of the Big Six looms large, with half of these dominant gangs being homegrown institutions, continuing to define the nation's outlaw motorcycle culture. The first Australian biker war never ended. It's still going on today. Thank you for holding on all the way to the end. Remember to subscribe.